This is the homework assignment, page 84, 2 through 22 even. I'm going to do 1 through 21 odd. Homework says, graph the solution set of each inequality and write it in interval notation. So, first thing I need to do is graph this, which means they want it to be on a number line. So I have -3, -2, -4. Remember, we have replaced closed dot with a bracket and open dot with parentheses. So this is an open dot, so we're going to use parentheses. It says x is less than -3, so we're going to open our parentheses this way and shade in this direction. And as we read a book from left to right, we will open our parentheses, because if it includes infinity or negative infinity is always a parenthesis, and we will go all the way up to -3, and it is a parenthesis on the graph, so it will be a parenthesis in our interval notation. Okay, here they want us to go from x is greater than 0.3, so I'm going to go 0, -1, and 1. I'll even put little dashes for 0.5. So 0.3 would be probably about right here. And here it is greater than or equal to, so I'm going to use a bracket. And I'm going to shade in the greater than area. Greater than or equal to is going to be this way. So in this case, it's a bracket on the graph, so it's going to be a bracket in my interval notation. So it's going to be 0.3 to infinity, and infinity is always a parenthesis. So my interval notation is from 0.3 to infinity. Excuse me. All right. You can rewrite this if you want, because it seems to me like everything is easier to graph if x is first. Now always make sure that your alligator mouth is open towards the correct thing. So in this case, the alligator mouth is open towards the x. So again, it's open towards the x. So I have -7 is less than or equal to x, or x is greater than or equal to -7. So I'm going to put -7 here, which means I have -6 here and -8 here. So if I do it this way over here, I've got x is greater than or equal to -7. So because it is greater than or equal to, I'm going to do a bracket. And anytime you put your variable first, you're always going to shade the way the arrow is pointing. So in this case, if I were to make this an arrow, I would shade the way the arrow is pointing, so that is to the right. Remember, if it's a bracket in your graph, it's going to be a bracket in your interval notation. Because it goes on forever, it goes on to infinity. So I have -7 to infinity. Excuse me. In this case, my graph is between two numbers. So I'm going to go -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I am going to have a parenthesis here because it is just less than x, and a parenthesis here. And I'm going to be in between these two, because here x is between -2 and 5, so I'm going to shade in between -2 and 5. So like I read a book, parenthesis at -2, comma, 5, and parenthesis at 5. And that's your answer. Same situation here, x is between these two numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and graph them. It's in a weird order, right? But I've got -1 here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have x is greater than -1 if I'm reading that, but not equal to. And then here I've got x is less than or equal to, so I'm going to put a bracket here. So just like I read a book from left or right, if x is between these babies, I'm going to shade in between them. And then I'm going to put my parentheses here. -1 goes all the way over to 5 and stops. If it's a bracket on the graph, it's a bracket in my interval notation. So it's from -1 to 5. All right, here we're going to have to do a little bit of solving first. So I'm going to add 9 to, just kidding. Let's try that again. I'm going to add 7 to both sides, giving me x is greater than or equal to -2. So now I'm going to draw my graph, put -2 right in the middle, which gives me -1 and -3. X is greater than or equal to, so I'm going to put a bracket. Because my variable's first, I'm going to shade the direction of the arrow. Okay, read it straight from the graph. Bracket, because there's a bracket on the graph, -2 to infinity. Always put a parenthesis on your infinity. So your interval notation is -2 to infinity. Okay, subtract 6x from both sides to get your variables together. So you're left with x is less than 1. Draw your graph. Put 1 right in the middle. So you have 2 and 0. Your variable is first, so you can go ahead and follow the arrow rule. If I make this an arrow, I'm going to shade the direction of the arrow. So because it is just less than, I'm just going to use a parenthesis, shade the direction of the arrow. So since it goes on forever this way, it's going to be -infinity. Infinity or -infinity is always a parenthesis. It's going to go all the way to 1, and then it's a parenthesis on the graph, so it's a parenthesis in my interval notation. So it is -infinity to 1. Here we're going to have two steps. I'm going to subtract 7x from both sides. That's going to give me x minus 7 is less than or equal to -5. Then I'm going to add 7 to both sides, giving me x is less than or equal to 2. Now I'm going to graph it. I'm going to put 2 right in the middle, and I've got 3 and 1. Because my variable is first, I can go ahead and draw as if this were an arrow. I'm going to shade the direction of the arrow. So it's a bracket because it's less than or equal to. And I'm going to shade the direction of the arrow, which would be this way. So I have -infinity because it starts forever going this way. Forever going this way here, right? And then it goes to 2 and it stops. It's a bracket on the graph, so it's a bracket in your interval notation. All right, here I want to get rid of this fraction. In order to get rid of the fraction, we always multiply by the LCD. So we've got 3x is greater than or equal to 24, because on the left side here my 4's cancel. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 3, giving me x is greater than or equal to 8. So I'm going to draw my graph. This will be 8, 9, and 7. Since my variable's first, I can keep using this rule. I'm going to shade the direction of the arrow pointing. So I'm going to shade this way. Okay, when I go to draw my interval notation, I'm going to start with the bracket. So bracket on the graph, bracket in my interval notation. 8 to positive infinity. Infinity or negative infinity, always get a parenthesis. So it's 8 to infinity. And then here I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And I get x is less than -4.7. So I want to graph that. So let's go, we'll put 5 here, 6 here, and 4 here. We'll even do the halves. So that's about 4.5. Oh, I should do negatives. Just kidding. So let's try that again. Being that we're dealing with negative numbers, not positive numbers. So that changes things up a bit. Alright, let's try that again. So I've got our number line here. So we'll do, how about -4, -3, and -5. Do our half numbers. So -4 and half would be right here. So -4.7 would be about right here. Okay, so because it is, our variable is first, so we can go ahead and still use our rule whichever way the arrow is pointing. So it is less than, and it is just less than, so we're going to use a parenthesis, and we're going to shade this way. Okay, so because we read a book from left to right, it's a parenthesis, -infinity to -4.7. It is a parenthesis on the graph, so it's a parenthesis in our interval notation. And then last but not least, we have negative, we're dividing both sides by -3, And then that should bring up a bell. We should be like ding, ding, ding in our head. If you divide by a negative, when you're dealing with inequalities, you always flip the sign. So we're going to spin this side around. It was greater than or equal to. Now it's less than or equal to. -3. Because we divided by a negative. So a big star in your notes there. So this is -3, -2, and -4. Because our variable is first, we're shading in the direction that the arrow points. So the arrow points this direction. It's a bracket because it's less than or equal to. So we're shading this way. And it becomes -infinity, which is always a parenthesis, to -3, bracket on the graph, bracket in our interval notation. And that is it. You guys have an awesome night. I will see you tomorrow.